Hello. So I mentioned in a past video, a recent video, how my mom, how she still blames a lot of our current behavior on things my father did, even though he's been gone since the 1990s. And how she's seeing this therapist now who I think is kind of like either a narc herself or just bullshitting my mother and telling her what she wants to hear so she doesn't drop her. Um, and this revolves around the term codependency, which is what my mom claims she is when she's not a codependent, she's a fucking narc. And I say that, again, not a person I think can show signs of codependency and narcissism, and my dad I think has narc traits as well, but also codependent ones. Like, I don't think it's black and white. And my mother, like, when I watched a recent video, I think it was Ross Rosenberg. Has a YouTube channel about narcissism, and he actually has some really good content, and he's made videos on codependency. And I remember watching it and how he was describing codependent relationships, and he was describing a codependent and a narcissist. And I was looking at it like, well, my father does have traits that fit into narcissism. Like, some of it definitely did describe some of his behaviors. My mother fit the bill 100%. And if not so much with her relationship with him, her relationship with me, which I'll talk more about later. But she claims that her therapist told her that you can't have narcissistic traits and codependent traits, that they're mutually exclusive. Which I think is total bullshit. That makes no sense. Like, you could be a narcissist, but you could get into a relationship with another narcissist and then take on some codependent traits in that relationship and then turn around to your kid, who's basically like a trapped victim, and just victimize them like full force. I don't think that is that much of a stretch. But apparently this therapist told my mother that she's not a narcissist. My dad was, and how she was a codependent in her relationship with him. And the reason why she was abusive towards me, this is what her therapist told her, which I think is such bullshit, that my calling her a narcissist isn't valid and her behavior is not narcissistic because she's still in codependent mode from being married to my dad 20 to 25 years ago. I swear to God, this is what the therapist told her. It makes absolutely no sense. And again, my father, like, I was watching this Ross Rosenberg video, and yeah, he does have some narc traits from the list. He does. But I think he's got some codependent ones as well. And what he was describing as a narcissist and how they treat codependents, it 100% described what my mother did to me. More than anything my father did. And again, I'm not excusing his behavior or saying he's not a narcissist, but she fits the bill to a T, 100%. And down to the last minute, they say that a lot of times a narcissist, what they do to a codependent is, I mean, my father, yeah, he kind of mooched and took advantage, which that's a narc trait. He had alcoholism, wasn't working for a while, was kind of like bumming around the house and just like just like not paying her any money. That is narcissistic. That's taking advantage. And I'm not saying that that's okay, but my mother, it was describing too how a narcissist treat a codependent, how they want their victims to think that they're useless without them and that they're nobody. They have nobody. No one's ever going to love them as much as them. They can't function in the world without the narcissist. They're incompetent. They're insane. That's what a true narcissist does to a true codependent. And that's exactly word for word what my mother did to me. She'd tell me that I have nobody but her. I'm alone in the world except for her. I'm nothing without her. I can't function on my own, I'm incompetent, I have bad judgment, I'm mentally unstable. This was word for word all stuff she said to me in my 20s when I was trying to become independent. So, you really think all this deflection back to my father is fair? No. Especially when it's used to invalidate my abuse and what I went through. And you can't blame my father for something he did in the 90s for treating me that way. It just makes no sense. And this too, like, this isn't something I said recently. She said recently. This was actually when she first started her therapy, when I went no contact a few years ago. Um, that this is apparently what the therapist told her, but I really don't think that's true. That you could only be either a narcissist or a codependent, and it can change in different relationships. I don't think that's true. Maybe I'm just insane. I don't know. Or you could have some codependent traits in one relationship but be a total narc in another. I just don't think they're totally separate. And codependents, a lot of times, true codependents, are people who, like myself, have been scapegoated and black sheep their entire life and go through life with low self esteem and tend to. I haven't typically. Usually, my romantic relationships and my friendships, I think I've always just had zero tolerance for narc behavior, so I don't tend to attract those types of people. But a lot of abuse victims do, and they tend to attract people that are similar to their parents or whoever abused them, and a lot of times don't even realize it. And then what Ross Rosenberg also said is that there's two types of codependence. The first type, the one who kind of is like stuck in this low self-esteem spiral and doesn't realize it and keeps getting victimized and doesn't really realize it. And then there's another type that it's almost like they seek out drama and abuse. Like, we all know that one person that goes from bad relationship to bad relationship and it blows up in their face the same way every time. It's like they keep dating the same guy or the same woman repeatedly, or picking the same friends or whatever it is, and don't seem to learn from it at all. And then they don't even look at themselves. They just keep blaming the individual people, but never think that there's a common denominator there. And it's almost like when they're in it and they're in the drama, it's almost like they thrive on it and they can't do without it. We all know people that are like this. And I just want to say, if you fall into this category, I'm sorry, but you are not an empath. Okay? You're not an empath. I've seen so many bullshit pop psychology articles about this second type of codependent and calling them empaths, and all these memes going on Facebook how empaths attract narcissists. And I've seen people that I know personally praising themselves like they're this empathic, all-caring person, when they're probably just like, they probably have borderline personality disorder and just don't show that many overt signs, so they may seem like a quiet person, but when you get to know them and see their life patterns, it's like they have all those borderline traits. Like, they seek drama, they over exaggerate emotions, they get overly upset about things, want attention. Like, and these are the people that claim to be empaths. And that is not what an empath is. It's been twisted away from its original meaning. So, somebody actually asked me about this on a past video, what I think of the term empath, and I think it is a real thing, but it's rare. It's usually been used more in the past to describe like a psychic medium almost that could sense what people are feeling even if they don't know them that well or know much about their situation. It's almost like picking up vibes, or like it's just been used in a totally different way than its original meaning. So any any time, like, and I don't do this anymore now that I know about narcissism and that calling these people out is useless. But when I used to call my mother out on her behavior without fail, she would always deflect back to my father. She's like, oh, but that's your father. That's your father. That's your father. And even if in some cases it is true, she hits actually more bullet points for the from the narc side and the borderline side than he does, and has completely no insight into it. But I'm the one that's socially retarded, right? Or she'll say like, "Oh, well that's your father's family. That's your father's that's the alcohol home. That's the alcohol." Like I've told you in the past how she's got this like repeat tape where she keeps talking about, "Oh, it's the alcohol, the alcohol, the alcohol." In a way to sort of make her family look as perfect as possible and deny any personal shortcoming. And what I've noticed researching all this stuff is that alcohol homes or homes with substance abuse oftentimes do take on a narcissistic dynamic. Like there's a golden child, a scapegoat, siblings might not get along, and one person takes on more responsibility than the other, one person's the slacker. I think a lot of times alcohol homes do mimic narcissism homes, but just because there's no substance abuse doesn't mean that you can't have similar dynamic. And my mother, I don't know if she really doesn't understand this, or she's just in such denial she keeps repeating it. Oh, but that's the alcohol, the alcoholism, the alcoholism, the alcoholism. Like I think she does see it and doesn't want to admit it. That's why she's like a broken record, just talking about the alcoholism. Oh, well, they're alcoholics. It's their. And she even has said to me recently how she thinks my dad's sisters are still embarrassed over what their brother did because the alcoholism is a family problem and it's their disease. It's like, really? And your family is perfect. I mean, you saw the video I made last time about, the my aunt making fun of my weight and what I ate and the whole soup drama at the funeral, which totally made my grandmother's funeral about her. But that's all okay because my dad's an alcoholic. Like it just the lack of logic in the whole thing just like makes me want to punch somebody. Not that I will. I'm not a violent person. But she's like, and I just think it's funny too how she claims that they're embarrassed. But everything she's talking about happened 25 years ago. Like, I know I keep making that point, but I just think it's odd. Oh, I bet they're embarrassed. It's like, or maybe they've moved on with their lives. Maybe, just maybe. It's been like 20 or 30 years. And, my own experience, my own abuse has been invalidated repeatedly. And when I moved away from my mother, I moved into my current house actually when I was engaged. And I showed all the classic signs of being traumatized. And I'm just going to go into this because what she claims my father did to her and how badly she was affected by him is what she did to me. And I'm not saying he didn't do anything wrong or she had no trauma from that, but I was more of a victim than she was in her own situation. Because I showed every sign of trauma. My self-esteem was in the toilet. I was having nightmares. I was having panic attacks, flashbacks. I was unemployed at the time, so I had to do something. Like it's when I started painting a lot. I literally I I went through a period of time where I was painting like 6 hours a day or 8 hours a day. I wasn't working. I didn't have kids. And there was something about it that was just so soothing and like I guess an expression form because my entire self and identity was so stifled for decades. Like any individual thought I had, I was mocked and screamed at for it and told I was bad at everything. So just for months, I just like painted day in and day out just to like get that. I don't know what I was trying to get out, but it was like a creative outlet. And there's something about like the painting across the canvas and the repetitive motion that's just very soothing. If you have trauma or you're having intrusive memories or And watching one of, I think it was another Ross Rosenberg video, looking back at myself in that time period, I was a classic trauma victim. Everything I was going through, mentally, physically, and, I know people tend to make fun of people, like, in middle age that go through a midlife crisis. Like, you have people, it's like they're in their 40s and suddenly they lose weight and, like, get a boob job, or they start working out all of a sudden, they're into their looks, or they buy a new car, or they take up some new hobby, buy a motorcycle, whatever it is. Like, people, I know people tend to make jokes about that and make fun of it, but I think a lot of these people have, like, maybe some trauma that's coming to the surface, and that's how they're reacting. Like, like, a lot of times too, people tend to do that after they get divorced or lose their job. It sets off almost like a midlife crisis, or maybe if they're not middle aged, just like a personal crisis or whatever, existential crisis. Um, but that's really a lot of times how people that are truly traumatized act. And there does tend to be a lot of rumination where you may ruminate over the past, or memories that you had previously forgotten come back. And why am I bringing all this up is because that those signs, those trauma signs, when we left my dad, I was 12 turning 13, and that's not how my mother behaved at all. It was all, he's the problem, and he was a problem, don't get me wrong. But then it all just, like, shifted, and all of a sudden I became the problem. Like, there was no, she had me in therapy. My daughter has so many mental issues, she has social issues, she needs help. I don't know what's wrong with her. Maybe she Then she started bringing up my health problems as a baby. I was developmentally delayed. Like, it's like she was looking to shrinks to prove that there was something wrong with me. For, like, it's okay for her to abuse her own daughter, but it's not okay for me to have depression after going through what I went through that summer with the divorce and my father's alcoholism. Like, and then she just reinforced repeatedly for decades that I had some sort of mental disability. And not once, not once was there any introspection towards herself. Not even like, well, I'm having a hard time, the whole thing. Even if she had said, like, yeah, your dad was very abusive or whatever, I need a therapist, like, that would have even been an improvement. Even if she had blamed him but then acknowledged that she needed therapy, that would have been an improvement. Cuz she acted, it's like, on one hand she claims to be the victim, but then on the other hand puts it all on me. Like, my daughter's defective, she's suffering from him, something's wrong. But it's like she claims to be infallible but the victim at the same time. It's just a total mind fuck. And then she never once, like, looking back, well, how did I end up with him, what happened in my family. She ended up with him because her family was so perfect that she didn't know people like that existed. That's what she said. Like, again, no self insight, no self reflection. It's all either his fault or mine, or I'm just defective and that I have brain damage from being born early. Um, and there was no, like I said, what I did with the painting, like, it was kind of random. I'd never painted before. Like, I just needed to get my mind off the abuse, so I just started doing it for hours a day, like, and it helped me. No, she didn't pick up any new hobbies, or even, and then she claims, like, oh, she was so stressed with money, and, like, but she had free time. I was very low maintenance. I spent a lot of my time just alone by myself. Complaining about weight, calling me too fat, but never doing anything about her own weight. And my whole life I've been a stick compared to her. So, there's that. And just like no, there were really no signs that she was truly traumatized. Like, it was all just, okay, well, he's gone. He was the main problem. I need another scapegoat. My daughter's defective. That's not what traumatized people do. That's what a narcissist does. And rumination is part of trauma recovery. Like, I know I've brought up recently how she talks about things that he did in the 90s in a very petty way. And I know, like, people say, oh, well, maybe that's rumination. That's just a part of the trauma recovery process. But not that kind of rumination. Like, being like, oh, remember 25 years ago when your dad fell down the stairs? Or I think the neighbor across the street knew what your father was. It's like, that's not rumination from trauma. That's deflection. Trying to deflect from your own issue. Because usually when trauma happens and someone ruminates over it, it's usually like almost immediately upon getting away from it, and memories come back that maybe you forgot or weren't able to truly reflect upon. So, rumination related to trauma is usually like it's usually like the first year of your recovery, maybe 2 years, where it's really coming up and bubbling to the surface. And I didn't see any of that going on with her. Like, she didn't really talk about him much or memories of him even that much back then. It was all just like trashing, like almost like saying, oh, well, his family's this, my family's better. These are 140 things that are wrong with you, Lisa. Like, there really wasn't a lot of trauma signs at all. And again, it's not to say that she had no trauma from being married to him, but she's trying to paint it as a black and white codependent narcissist relationship, and it absolutely was not. She's trying to paint their marriage as what was basically mine and her relationship. Only she was me, and it's just so distorted. And it minimizes my voice even more. Like, it doesn't matter. She's like, "Oh, well, that's just what your father did. That's just what your father." And then it's almost like because he's an alcoholic and she's not, I can't even speak. Like, I can't even voice any of my own abuse. I'm not that he didn't do anything towards me either, but she just gets 100% just a write off because she's perfect. And that's kind of how a lot of friends and extended family act, which is why I sort of avoid them as well because I just don't want to listen to it. I just yeah, it's our closet in the back. It's a mess, but we got to clean this whole office anyway. We're moving this office downstairs because this is going to be the new baby's room. So yeah, I know sometimes I just come on here and I ramble, but after seeing some videos on codependency and what trauma victims really do go through, I feel like, I've been told a lot of my life that I have no right to my own feelings, but I feel now that that's wrong, and I feel like every feeling I have is valid. So, I think these communities are good for that. And yeah, so I guess I'll see you on the next video because this has already gone on a really long time.